guys, my name is Trinh and today I'm here to do a... What am I doing? Oh my god. I'm here to do my January and February wrap up. So in January, I read 13 books and then in February, I read 15 books. I'm looking at the stack of books right next to me and it's so scary because there are so many things that I want to talk about, but I know for a fact I don't want to make this video super long. I'm gonna try to be concise and well-spoken because there are certain things that I want to discuss about certain books, I guess. So let's get started. First and foremost, let's talk about Beastars. I'm here to talk about volume 9 and then 10. I actually read both volumes in January. So I believe this was like the very first book that I read in the year 2021. And then for Beastars volume 10, I actually read this a few days after it came out. Basically, in this world, we have herbivores and carnivores and they go to school together. Our main character is Horikoshi, and as of right now, he has found the murderer of his friend in the very first volume. He really wants to fight this animal. And honestly, I cannot believe we have finally found the murderer of the alpaca in like the first volume. I think we found the identity of the murderer in the 9th volume. So I was honestly shook. I did not expect it at all. And yeah, let's talk about this volume. So it was so freaking good, and there are some trigger warnings real quick. Amputation, mention of suicide, and murder. This volume is so freaking good. So many things happen, and like I said, I guess like the thing that's like really important is that we have finally found the murderer of Horikoshi's friend in the very first volume. In addition to that, this volume is so freaking funny. So I actually had a lot of fun reading this volume, so I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. As for volume 10, I really enjoyed it, but it's not my favorite volume of the entire series. I will say this volume is also very funny. The ending is funny, so I cannot wait to read volume 11, I believe, because it's coming out sometime in March. But overall, I really enjoy reading Beastars, and I forgot to say that the author is Paru Itagaki, and yeah, I'm like really loving Beastars and I cannot wait to read the next volume. And now we have to talk about Champion and Rebel by Marie Lu. If you don't know, these books are the last 2 books of the Legend series. So originally it was supposed to be a trilogy, but a few years later, Marie Lu comes out with Rebel. So let's quickly talk about Champion because like I said, this was supposed to be like the finale of the trilogy. Real quick, this series follows June and Day, and in the very first book we learn about the United States, like the Empire and then the Republic, and what else happened? Oh my god, I don't remember anything. The 2 main characters are June and Day, and if you don't know, this is a dystopian series. This is no longer a trilogy. So real quick, there are some trigger warnings for this book: shooting, murder, and death. This is what I had to say in my post-it note. So I said that this is probably my favorite book from the series. Honestly, looking back, that is not 100% true because when I finished this book, obviously I only read the first 3 books. So of course, after I finished this book, I was like, yeah, I think this might be my favorite, but this is actually my favorite Rebel because it's so freaking good. But anyway, it has a mix of dystopia and romance. I actually really like the 2 main characters a lot in this book, but not just that, I actually ship them as a couple because in the first book, I did not really like them as a couple, and then in Prodigy, I believe that's the second book, basically the first half of the second book, I really did not like the 2 main characters together as a couple, but the last half of Prodigy, I really fell in love with them as a couple, and then in this book, I really ship the 2 main characters together. Oh my god, the ending hurts me more than I thought. I cried my eyes out reading this book, and I was just really shocked that this book really moves me in a way that I never thought before because I am so freaking late to this series. I am glad that I finally read this series. So for Champion, I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. I think this is still a good book. However, I'm really glad that we have Rebel, which is a book that takes place 10 years after Champion. The main characters are a little bit different. Basically, in this book, we follow Day, obviously. However, we also follow Eden, who is Day's younger brother. All I can say is that we follow Eden and Day in this new city. There are problems within the city because this government is just so flawed because they have like the worst kind of system. Their system is this point-based kind of system. So everyone has like a certain point, and if you do something good, you gain points, but if you do something bad, you lose points. It's actually a very flawed system because in this book we go in depth with the fact that this system is literally designed to keep the poor people poor and the rich people really rich. Of course, there are some trigger warnings for this book: suicide, murder, violence, and bullying. It's safe to say that this is actually my favorite book of the entire series, and I'm really shocked because I feel like this book doesn't have like the best ratings on Goodreads. I feel like a lot of people have given this like 1 or 2 stars, but after I finished Rebel, I was like, this is so freaking good, and I actually really enjoy it more than the first 3 books, so I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I really love reading from Day and Eden's perspective. I really love the characters as well, but I think overall I'm very captivated by the plot. This government is just so corrupted. Like I said, this point-based system is just so flawed because we see so many people in like the poor district. They are literally so damn poor that it's actually really hard to earn points and be rich, I guess. Overall, I really enjoyed reading this book, and honestly, I'm really glad that I read this book because a lot of things have changed. Our characters have definitely changed and grown up, and it's honestly really nice to see everything. So yeah, love the characters, love the plot, and I love the discussion of this point-based system because it sucks. My dog is barking. The next book is You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. I read this book in January. I believe I read this as an ebook on Libby, and after finishing the book, I loved it so much that I actually got a physical copy for myself. I feel like this romance novel is so different from the others because this is basically a second chance romance kind of thing. The 2 main characters, Naomi and Nicholas, they're basically engaged. However, they really don't like each other, and since we read from Naomi's perspective, we definitely get to see how she actually kind of despises her fiance, and she really wants to break up this marriage. No, not marriage, what you call it, engagement. She really wants to break it off. However, the wedding is non-refundable. I think there's this whole thing how like the in-laws are screwing her over, so if she breaks off the wedding, then she has to pay for everything, and she doesn't really have like enough money to do that, so she's just sticking around. This book is so freaking amazing, and I'm so glad that I read this in January because I like really enjoy everything. It was just such a joy to see the 2 main characters falling in love again because of course towards like the beginning of this book they don't really like each other, but by the end of this book you get to see how much they actually like really love each other, and it's just so beautiful. And of course, you know, I really adore the main characters. I will say Naomi is one of the most ridiculous characters I've ever read because there are some parts where I was just so annoyed with her. So I want to say towards the middle of the book she did something really stupid, and I mean like this is like the dumbest thing I've ever read about. So long story short, she really wants to piss off her fiance's mom because let's face it, the in-law suck. Nicholas' mom suck. She is a horrible person. But anyway, Naomi decides to sell her good car for this stick shift even though she doesn't know how to drive a stick shift. So when I read that part, I was like, oh my god, she's gonna embarrass herself. She was driving the stick shift to the restaurant, and then the stick shift is being a stick shift, so I think she stopped at a red light, and then the car, you know, something happened. She basically runs out of the car and hides behind a building. She literally just runs away, and I was so mad at her because that is such a stupid thing to do. First of all, she should have never traded her good car for a stick shift, a car that she knows she cannot drive. So that part really pissed me off. But I will say the last half of this book was just amazing because that's when we really get to see the 2 main characters chilling and helping each other out and falling in love. Basically in this book they were doing pranks and stuff. Honestly, this book is just so cute, and I think it's very realistic because the 2 main characters, the reason why they don't like each other is because they haven't communicated in such a long time, and honestly it's just nice to see them talk to each other and do nice things for each other. Like I said, the last half really makes this book amazing, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this book. It's just so freaking cute. Honestly, I really adore this book, and I cannot wait to read more books from the author. The next book is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. I actually read this book with my peripatetized Sandy in January. If you don't know, this is the 4th book of An Ember in the Ashes series. Of course, there are some trigger warnings for this book: murder, death, and decapitation. Since this is the final book of the series, I cannot say much without spoiling everything. I will say the ending destroys me. Like, I was just crying my eyes out. Overall, I think this is a very good finale. And real quick, I want to say that I was just confused with the spiritual stuff. I want to say in the 3rd and this book, we really go in depth with the spiritual side of this whole journey, and I was just so lost and confused. So that's why I didn't really enjoy the 3rd book that much. And this book, I think in the middle, it kind of drags on a little bit, but the ending is so freaking good. It's devastating, but it's so good and important. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm really glad that I'm finally done with the series. The next book is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda. I actually read this book on NetGalley because I got an ARC from Penguin Teen. When I was reading this book, they actually reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want the final copy of this book? And I was like, yeah, why not? I'm actually really enjoying the book right now. There are some trigger warnings for this book: racism, homophobia, and theme of deportation. If you don't know, this is a YA historical fiction where the main character, she is Chinese American. Her name is Lily. She's a lesbian and she's dealing with the fact that she is really into girls. She's drawn to this place called the Telegraph Club. Basically, it's a club for women, like gay women, and she's just so intrigued. She really wants to go there, and then she learns that there's this girl named Kathleen at her school. She has access to this club and she decides to join her, and then eventually she and Kathleen become a couple. But of course, it's actually really hard to be openly gay. This book is so freaking amazing and I'm really glad that I read this. I adore the characters, especially Lily and Kathleen, because I think they're just wonderful. As for Lily, the main character, I feel like she's definitely relatable because if you think about it, she's Asian, she's gay, and she knows that she cannot express herself and just be herself in front of other people because they're going to deny her sexuality. And of course, there are so many important discussions in this book, like racism, deportation, what it's like to be gay in 1954. I think overall this book is amazing. It's a really great historical fiction, so if you're really into that genre, then I highly recommend this book. I gave this a 4 to 5 stars, and honestly, I'm really glad that I read it. And now let's talk about My Hero Academia by Kohei Horikoshi. I think that's how you say the author's name. Basically, I am reading the series and I have 6 volumes to talk about. These are actually my boyfriend's books, and honestly, I'm really glad that he has these books because I don't really want to spend my money on these books, not yet. In January, I read 2 volumes, and then in February, I read 3, 4, 5, 6, so 4 volumes. If you don't know, this series is about superheroes. Basically, in this world, some people have quirks, and quirks is like superhero ability, you know, and our main character really wants to be a superhero. He really wants to have a quirk. However, he doesn't have a quirk. He cannot be a superhero, but in the first volume, he is given an opportunity to receive a quirk and become a superhero. So of course, he goes to the school, he meets other characters, and everyone has superhero abilities and stuff like that. It's really, really cool, and honestly, this series is so freaking fun. Volume 1 is actually really good. I think this is a really great introduction to this world and to this series overall. So we get to learn about the characters and the world building, like the quirk thing. In the first volume, I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. The second volume, I really enjoyed this as well. I will say the ending like really shocked me because something happened. Well, the last half of this book, basically something happened to like our group of characters and it was actually like really scary, so I gave this 4 to 5 stars. And then the third volume, I believe this is the beginning of this competition between this group of characters, so I give this volume 4 to 5 stars. The fourth volume is also really good, and I do want to comment on my favorite quirk as of right now. I think the one that really has my attention is brainwashing. Oh my god, it's such a cool ability, and of course we get to see other characters as well, like Todoroki. He's like one of my faves, so of course I remember him the most. And yeah, this volume is also really good, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The fifth volume is so freaking good, and I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This volume is really good because we get to see Todoroki and his backstory, and let's face it, he looks like Zuko, so automatically he has become one of my favorite characters in this series. I'm just kidding, I'm not being biased, but I will say I really like his backstory. It's very similar to Zuko, so obviously that's why I gravitated towards Todoroki. So this volume is so freaking good, and I believe this is when the the tournament ends, so that was pretty cool. The sixth volume, I will say the last half was like so freaking good that it pushes me to give this volume 4.5 out of 5 stars because man, the ending was just like really good in my opinion, and I cannot wait to read the next volume because I do want to know what's gonna happen. This is like really good so far, so I cannot wait to continue with the manga series. Okay, let's talk about Vampire Academy and Frostbite by Richelle Mead. If you don't know, Sandy, Tiffany, and I were actually hosting a year-long read-along called the Saint Blamius Read-Along. Basically, we're reading the Vampire Academy series and the Bloodline series for like the entire year of 2021. So in January, we read Vampire Academy, and then in February, we read Frostbite. Let's quickly talk about Vampire Academy. There are some trigger warnings for this book: animal death / cruelty, cutting, self-harm, depression, bullying, mention of domestic abuse. What's funny is that I put parent / student relationship when it's actually teacher / student relationship, sexual harassment, slut shaming, and cheating. If you don't know, Vampire Academy is about vampires. Our main character is Rose, and she's a Dhampir. Basically, she's a guardian, and her best friend is Lissa, who is a Moroi. In this book, it goes in depth with like the different kind of vampires. Just so you know, this first book is really dark, way darker than I thought, because we cover so many topics in this book. I feel like this is a very good first book because it sets up the story and the characters and the world building. But yeah, this book is so freaking good. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I'll have the link to our live show because we talk about this book with Joel, so you know, it was really fun. so I'm really glad that I read this book in January. Frosbite by Richelle Mead, on the other hand, is probably one of my least favorite books of the entire series. Obviously, this is the second book, and I will say I feel like this book does a really good job showing us how evil and powerful the Zoboi is. It's actually really scary because whenever a Zoboi shows up, I get scared. The main character gets scared. Everyone gets scared because they're capable of doing such evil things, you know? Like, it's actually so horrifying. Like, literally the first two chapters, I want to say, we see how the Zoboi basically kill so many people in this one house. It's just dark and scary. And let me tell you the trigger warnings because I totally forgot. Slut shaming, violence, murder, decapitation, and death. So this book is definitely really dark, like from beginning to end, because we just get to see a lot of murders. But I will say the one thing that annoys me the most is Rose. Our main character was just so petty throughout this entire book, and I literally hated it so much because I was just so annoyed at her. However, I do want to say that I really hope that she will grow a lot in the later books because we have 4 more books in this series, and I do believe that our main character can grow and be a better person later on. So yeah, in this book she's not the best, but I definitely don't hate her. I know that I complain about her a lot in our live show, but like I said, I really don't hate her, and I do want to see her be a better person. So with this book, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to read Shadow Kiss in March. We have a special guest. My baby boy Miko is here, so would you like to join me and help me talk about these books? The next book that I want to talk about is I Said Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho and Dung Ho. This book is really cute. If you don't know, this is a picture book. Miko, chill please. Anyway, this book is a children's picture book, and it's really cute because it's all about loving your features, your Asian features to be specific, like your eyes and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I have Asian eyes because I'm Asian. If you don't know, I'm Vietnamese. This book is really cute. Obviously, is I think a perfect book to read to your children. However, I'm not a child, even though I act like it sometimes, but I am 23, and the thing is, I have come to love my physical features. I love my eyes, I love my nose, I love my skin. I'm at a point where I really like love myself, which is a good thing, you know. This book doesn't really have a huge impact on me because obviously I am not the targeted audience. I'm not a child, so obviously I don't like really love this book, but this book is still good. It's still very important. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's a good book. If you do have like Asian children, then I highly recommend reading this book to them because I think this will help them by the long run. The next book is We Are the Ashes, We Are the Fire by Joy McCullough. I actually read an arc on NetGalley provided by Penguin Teen, so I really appreciate that. Real quick, there are some trigger warnings for this book: rape, slut shaming, and self-harm. The main character here, her name is M, and I believe her older sister has been raped at her university, and of course the entire thing has like a huge impact on the family. I believe the trial, it went kind of well, but then at the same time, the guy who raped the older sister, he gets no prison time whatsoever. So of course it's just like a huge slap in the face for the family, and the main character M, she is just devastated and angry at the outcome. Eventually the main character, she's introduced to this figure named Margaret the Brazier. I don't know, but it says that she is a legendary avenging knight of rape victims. Basically the main character was like, oh my god, I want to be her, I want to write a story about her, so that's what I'm gonna do. Here's the thing, this book is actually like a little bit different. So obviously we get like the basic novel form of the book, and then we also get the verse, so the novel in verse kind of thing. It's basically when the main character is writing about Margaret. You know, it's cool and all until the last half of this book, because my god, I was just so disappointed. Real quick, I want to say that the first half is actually really good. I was engaged with the story and I find it very important. I feel really bad for the older sister because she went through so much, and of course the entire family being supportive, but at the same time they just don't know what to do because the outcome is just horrible. Like the fact that the rapist gets no prison time is just ridiculous. Like I said, the first half was so freaking good, and then the last half was just not what I expected. Okay, so like towards the middle of the book, it kind of went downhill. The main character was just so focused on writing the story that she's just straight up neglect everything around her. I hate the fact that towards like the middle of this book, there's a scene where her friend was like asking for the main character's help, and she's just like, nah, I'm busy right now. I was just so surprised at the fact that the main character straight up like ignore her friend. And like I said, the last half of this book, it was just so different from what I expected, because next thing you know, the main character was just focused on writing the story about Margaret, but I didn't care about that. I'm not gonna lie, I really want to focus on the main character, her friends, and her family, and what's going on in the real life world, not this story that the main character is writing. So at the end of the day, I give this book 2 out of 5 stars, and honestly, I'm really sad about it because this book was so good in the first half, but the last half went in a completely different direction, and I was just not a big fan of it. The next book is Punching the Air by Zoboi and Dr. Yusef Salaam. There are some trigger warnings for this book: wrongful imprisonment, wrongful conviction, physical violence, microaggressions, and racism. Punching the Air is about a main character named Amal who gets convicted for a crime that he did not commit. This story is just sad. It's generally like so freaking sad, but I feel like towards the end it was like a little bit hopeful. Overall, this story is really good. I know that I just told you like a one-line synopsis and then I'm gonna jump right into the review, but honestly, I think that's all you need to know. This book is so important because unfortunately there are a lot of black and brown kids being convicted for something that they have never done. I feel like our main character Amal is just such a good character, and I feel really bad for him because obviously throughout this entire book we get to see how this whole situation really affects him mentally, physically, emotionally as well. But of course, it's really about him finding his voice and also expressing his art, I guess, throughout this entire thing, and it's a good book. And also, if you don't know, this is actually a novel with verse. I believe I gave this 5 out of 5 stars because this book is freaking good, okay? So I really recommend it, and also the audiobook is actually really good, so I also recommend that as well. The next book is A Fall Love Story by Loang Lei. There are some trigger warnings for this book: mentions of war, death of a loved one, and racism. Basically, our 2 main characters, Bao and Lin, they're like 17, 18, and their families run their own pho shop right across the street. However, both families don't like each other at all. So in a way, Bao and Lin, they never like really became friends until this one event that happened towards the beginning of this book, and then eventually we get to see our 2 main characters becoming good friends and falling in love. And honestly, this book was everything to me. I just love the fact that this book has so many Vietnamese like culture, I guess. Obviously the food, the language, the main characters, the side characters as well, and the family. There's just so many Vietnamese things in this book, and honestly I was just brimming with joy when I was reading this because this means a lot to me. As for the 2 main characters, I really adore Bao and Lin. I love the fact that they become really good friends, and then we see them just falling in love with each other. I will say, when it comes to like the romantic relationship between both characters, I feel like that could have been done so much better. Like I really wish we have more romantic scenes between the 2 main characters. I guess a critique that I have when it comes to this book is the writing. I just really wish we have more physical description for the characters. I mean all characters, not just the main characters but the side characters as well. That is something that I feel like we were missing, because as I was reading this book I was just like, wait, what do these characters even look like? Here's the thing, when I read this book I was actually reading an arc on NetGalley, so it was not the final copy. I definitely noticed some like grammatical errors. This is the final copy, and I'm planning to reread this book in March, so I really hope that the author made some changes when it comes to this book. Overall, this book is really good. I find that it's not like the perfect book obviously, but I was just so happy when I was reading this, so of course I give this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I will say, if you're Vietnamese or Vietnamese American, I highly recommend this book because the representation is just so good. The next book is Happily Ever Afters by Elise Bryant. There are some trigger warnings for this book: racism, microaggressions, mentions of Harry Potter, too much mention of Harry Potter if I do say so myself, ableism, low-key cheating, and then dead naming of a famous trans person. The main character of this book is Tessa, and basically she is, I believe, a fan fiction writer. So she loves writing about romance. She attends this really cool school, what the hell, but basically this prestigious school, and she gets into this creative writing program, and then next thing you know, she has writer's block. She literally struggled writing for like a good chunk of this book, and of course it's like really weird. The main character's best friend, she comes up with a plan for the main character, being like, hey, since you're struggling to write romance, we should put you into a romantic relationship, because hopefully if you're, you know, in a romantic relationship, you will feel inspired to write romance. And the plan is kind of dumb considering she starts doing this kind of whole thing with a guy who has a girlfriend, but we'll talk more about that. But yeah, this book, oh, I want to say that I was just so disappointed with this book because I really wanted to love it. There's so much potential for this book to be good, and unfortunately there are just so many missed opportunities. Oh my god. Here are my issues. First of all, the main character decides to go after a guy who has a girlfriend. I don't care that he and his girlfriend, they're on and off for many years. I don't care about that because when we're reading this book, they're together. They are boyfriend and girlfriend, and I hate the fact that the main character and her friend are completely aware of the fact that he has a girlfriend, and yet they still choose to go after him. That is something that I just really hated because number one, why him? He's not even a good person. First of all, I cannot even remember his name, okay? That's how much I don't care about him, and I hate the fact that the main character is lusting over this guy just because he's good looking. Meanwhile, there's a perfectly nice guy right next door. His name is Sam. I love him so much, and I hate the fact that he gets mistreated in this book because it just sucks, okay? Like, this guy is so wonderful and he just really adores the main character, but I kind of hate the fact that she just goes after the other guy, the guy who has a girlfriend. And also, let's quickly talk about Harry Potter in this book because oh my god, there are so many references to Harry Potter and I'm just sick of it. I'm honestly so tired of YA contemporaries referencing Harry Potter because as of right now, I don't think we should do that. It was cute at first a few years ago, but right now I'm pretty sure everyone knows that J.K. Rowling is a TERF. I really hate when books mention Harry Potter. Like, I really hate it. Like, yeah, I love the series, sure. However, I know not to talk about those books here on my channel. I just know that when I do, you know, mention Harry Potter, I'm going to critique J.K. Rowling. But anyway, the main character loves Harry Potter. There's this conversation where she and the guy that she has a crush on, they talk about Harry Potter for multiple pages. And I'm sitting here like, are you serious? What's really funny was that in this conversation, the main character really wants to say, hey, J.K. Rowling is problematic. J.K. Rowling is a TERF. J.K. Rowling is a pretty awful author, but there's no conversation about that in this book. I feel like we could have gone there, but here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that if the author put that kind of conversation into this book would have been dragged by Harry Potter stans, okay? But at the same time, a part of me is just like, just say it. If you can go on for multiple pages about Harry Potter, you can definitely mention the author and how she's very harmful for the trans community. Last but not least, I just hate the fact that Tessa does not take schooling seriously. I find it very hard to believe that this girl didn't even think about sharing her work in this creative writing class. Before I went into my creative writing class a few years ago, I knew for a fact I needed to share my work with other people. So that's why I was just so frustrated with the main character and her attitude towards this school and this class because oh my god, she was about to fail the class. That's how bad it was. She just didn't do her homework, her classwork. She didn't write anything, and I was just so frustrated. And then in this book, she lies to her mom about being chosen for the Winter Gala. That was I just have so many complaints with this book, and I'm honestly disappointed that I don't love this book. So I gave this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, that's just me being generous because let's face it, if I were to change my rating, it would be a 2 out of 5 stars, definitely. Like, I really don't love this book, and like I said, there's just so many missed opportunities. Let's just move on before I cry. The next book is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I actually read this book with Jasmine because we both read this book for the Down Memory Jane read-along. If you don't know, there is a read-along where I believe the host, they read books by Jane Austen, but not just that, retelling of the novels from Jane Austen. I decided to reread Pride and Prejudice because it's been a few years. I want to say 7 years. Wow, this book is not my favorite. Honestly, it's kind of boring. But if you don't know, this is a classic, and the main character is Elizabeth or Lizzie. She has a complicated relationship with Mr. Darcy. Basically just like family drama. It's a whole lot because this book, if you think about it, is pretty long. It's almost 400 pages, and oh my god, I was kind of bored for a majority of this book. I think my favorite part is part 3. Part 1 is like pretty good. Part 2 was so boring, okay? Like, I cannot remember what happened in part 2. Part 3 is like definitely good, but at the same time, when I finished this novel, I was just so indifferent to everything. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. I was talking to Jasmine about this book, and she told me that if I don't enjoy Pride and Prejudice, then I might not enjoy other books by Jane Austen as well. So unfortunately, I'm gonna stop participating in the read-along because if I don't like this book, then I cannot imagine loving other books by Jane Austen, you know? However, if you love Jane Austen and you love classics, or like you want to read Jane Austen's books for the first time, then I highly recommend checking out the read-along because obviously you're gonna be reading books by Jane Austen for the entire year of 2021. So definitely check it out. The next book is Fence Striking Distance by Sarah Rees Brennan. If you don't know, there is a comic book series called Fence, and it's by C.S. Pacat. There are 4 volumes out right now, and then we have this novel, and basically this takes place after after the comic book series. In this book, we follow our 4 main characters named Nicholas, Seiji, Harvard, and then Aiden. Basically, these characters, they're in a fencing team. They need to work together because even though they're great fencers, they don't work well together. But here's the thing, in this book, there's not much fencing going on, so we'll talk more about that. But yeah, this book is really about our 4 main characters and the shenanigans that they go through, and there's fake dating in this. It's cute and all, but not my favorite book, okay? First of all, let me tell you the trigger warnings. Mention of alcohol abuse, mentions of child neglect, bullying, and classism. Honestly, I'm just so disappointed with this book because I really love the characters. I really love the comic book series, but the writing is just not good. I was so frustrated with the writing. The way certain things are written, I just hated it because I kid you not, every 2 or 3 pages, I would read something that I just don't like and I had to put it down and just do my breathing exercise, I guess. Just so you know, even though we have 4 main characters, there are 2 different storylines. Basically, we have Nicholas and Seiji in one storyline and then also another character. And then we have Harvard and Aiden for the other storyline. And I'm not gonna lie, the one that I care the most is about these 2 characters right here. I love Harvard and Aiden so freaking much because I see potential, okay? So basically, they're best friends. Aiden is a playboy, but deep down, he loves Harvard, and Harvard is such a soft boy. We definitely see him like falling for Aiden, but it's very complicated because they're best friends and they don't want to mess things up if they were to pursue a romantic relationship. Do you see the vision? I see a vision and I love it. But man, this book like really broke me in half. Like literally the ending, I was crying. This is a book that I don't really like because it disappointed me. The writing is not the best. However, the fucking ending destroys me because I care so much about Harvard and Aiden. I really want them to be together, but it's complicated. So of course, I got my feelings hurt towards the end of this book. And then the other storylines, Seiji and Nicholas, I didn't really care about their storyline. I feel like I like them, you know, individually as characters, but the storyline is just weird in my opinion. I don't know. It's not horrible, but it's definitely something that I don't pay much attention to because I was invested in Harvard and Aiden. So I guess that's my thought on this book. I'm just so disappointed with this book. It makes me so sad because here's the thing, I am planning to read the sequel. It's called Fence Disarm. I can't help it, okay? Like I want to know what's gonna happen to Harvard and Aiden. Like that's why I'm reading the novels because I care so much about these 2 main characters right here. So at the end of the day, I give this book 2 out of 5 stars. I just love the comic book series so much, and to see this book not being amazing makes me very sad. But still, I really hope that the sequel is so freaking good because I just want Harvard and Aiden to be together and be happy. Like that's literally all I want. All right, folks. Let's talk about Cassandra Clare, the Shadowhunter Chronicles, because I'm here to talk about Chain of Gold and Chain of Iron. First and foremost, let's talk about Chain of Gold. This is actually a reread for me. I read this for the first time last year, I believe March of 2020. There are some trigger warnings for this book. Violence, murder, death, alcoholism, and emotional manipulation. If you don't know, this is the very first book of The Last Hours by Cassandra Clare, which is a brand new trilogy. This book and this series follows the children of the characters from TID. The 3 main characters are Cordelia, James, and Lucy. In this book, there's like a demon attack. It's very weird. It's rare. Basically, demons are coming out in the daylight and they're attacking shadow hunters and people get killed. People get poisoned. It's really bad. And then London is under quarantine and it's up to our main characters to save the day. First of all, Chain of Gold, ooh, it aged like fine wine. I will say my rating has changed a little bit, but still this book is very good. I think it's a really good first book. It's so thick, but man, it's just good, entertaining. I really adore the characters. Something that I do want to say is that my opinion regarding Grace Blackthorne has definitely changed after rereading this book. She's a victim of Tatiana's abuse. She's not really the bad guy. Unfortunately, she has to do these horrible things because of her adopted mother. Oh my god, I hate Tatiana, but anyway. I give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Also, I do want to say that I have a book review and discussion for this book. It was filmed last year. Please excuse me just cursing out Grace Blackthorne. I don't hate her. I was just very frustrated in 2020, but yeah, she's a good character. And now let's talk about Chain of Iron because I am just happy to have this in my collection. As you can see, this is an arc and she's thick. This book is very good. I have a reading vlog for Chain of Iron. I just put it up yesterday, and then sometime this month I will put up my book review and discussion for Chain of Iron because I took notes. I have a lot of things to say when it comes to this book, so I'm not gonna go in depth with everything because I will have a separate video for that. But let me just say, this book really reminds me of Clockwork Prince. Chain of Iron is a very character driven book. There's not much action scenes, so I guess like that's my critique, is that I really wish we get to see our main characters fighting, but we don't get that at all. It's all about drama and the romance and the drama. I just said that, but basically the drama, okay? It's all about the characters, the relationships, and I will say it broke me at the end. I'll talk more about that, but at the end of the day, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. There are some trigger warnings for this book: racism, police brutality, abuse, and homophobic slurs, and then grief. Basically, this book is about the author just writing about his experiences, what he has learned throughout his entire life, and everything is addressed to his son. This book is so freaking good. I listened to the audiobook, so it was pretty short and it went by really fast. I feel like I learned a lot. There's something that you definitely need to know is that the author, I believe he was based around where I live right now. So he has shed light on certain things that I never even knew. I cannot say anything because I don't want to expose where I live, but certain things that he has commented on, I definitely know what he's talking about because it's literally in my state. It's literally around where I live right now, and I just didn't know. The writing is really good. And something you need to know is that in this book, the author definitely goes in depth with the fact that his friend was killed by a police officer. This book overall is very good, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely think this is a very important book that everyone should read. I highly recommend the audiobook. It's narrated by the author, and I feel like he did a really great job doing what he did in the audiobook. The next book is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. I actually read this book on NetGalley. After I finished it, I was like, wow, that was really good. So basically, on my birthday, the day that this book came out, I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought my own copy. So here it is. This is what the final version looks like. Real quick, there are some trigger warnings for this book: mental illness, depression, anxiety, self-harm, death of a loved one, and amputation. In the beginning of this book, our main character named Grace, she goes to Vegas to celebrate. She gets married to this girl, and then she goes back to her hometown, to where she lives, obviously. Basically, she's dealing a lot with her career and the expectation from her father because her dad really wants her to be a doctor, but instead she pursues a PhD in astronomy. She graduated, but here's the thing, she doesn't have a job lined up. I guess the job that she was destined to have, they don't really accept her, and in a way they make her question herself. So basically, this book is darker than I thought, because when I read the synopsis for the first time, it sounds like a cute romance novel that is very similar to Christina Lauren, because here's the thing, Christina Lauren actually has a book about these two people getting drunkenly married in Vegas. So of course I thought this was gonna be very similar to that. However, it's really not, because yeah, just romance, but really this book is about our main character Grace and what she's dealing with regarding mental illness. I will say it's just so relatable because she's a person in her 20s and she doesn't have a job. She's done with her education, but like I said, she doesn't have a job and she feels lost and she feels lonely. And I was just like, I did not sign up for this. I was not prepared to read a book this relatable. I will say the last 100 pages is so good and important. Basically, Grace has decided to finally seek help and finally put her mental health at the forefront, which is so important because she's just going through so much and I really want the best for her. I just wish the romance is developed better, but still, this book is really about our main character Grace, and it was such a good book, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book is American Street by E.B. Zoboi. There are some trigger warnings for this book: deportation, abusive relationship, physical abuse and assault, violence, murder, and then death. In the beginning of this book, our main character Fabiola, she and her mom basically immigrated to America, but I think once they get to New Jersey, her mom is being detained. Meanwhile, Fabiola gets to go to Detroit and just move in with her aunt's family. In Detroit, Fabiola gets to know her cousins Chantel, Pri, and then Donna, I believe. She goes to school, she meets new people, but then turns out life in America is not as amazing as you would think. I will say I enjoyed this book, but the ending made me question so many things, okay? So this book was honestly kind of hard to read at times. I listened to the audiobook and there's a few scenes where I was just not having a great time because one of the cousins named Donna, basically she's in this horrible and abusive relationship with this guy named Dre. Dre sucks. He abuses Donna. He's just so toxic. Like every time he shows up, I know that something horrible is gonna happen and I just hate him. But anyway, I was enjoying this book, and then I want to say the last 50 pages, I was just frustrated, especially at the main character Fabiola. I was mad at her because she decides to just be the kind of person who fixes problems. But here's the thing, she makes things 10 times worse than they need to be. I was just disagreeing with a lot of things that she was doing towards the end. I cannot say anything, but let me just say it's so devastating. Like I was just so sad. I was reading the book or like listening to the audiobook. I was on the floor, I was like cleaning my bookshelves, and I just had to sit there and just listen to the audiobook because I I could not believe what I was hearing. Besides that, there are so many important discussions, definitely, like life in America and how it's being perceived, toxic relationship, drug dealing, drug use. Overall, this book, I don't hate it. I really don't. I would have given it a 4 out of 5 stars, but the ending makes me like mad at the main character. So at the end of the day, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's still a good rating, but I really wanted to give it a higher rating, but the main character really makes me like angry at the end because I was mad. I was so mad at her and her actions, and oh my god, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So there's that. I've been here for hours, guys. I'm so tired. But anyway, last but not least, I'm going to talk about On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. There are some trigger warnings for this book. Racism, gun violence, past child abandonment, drug dealing, mentions of drug addiction, mentions of gang activity and violence, mentions of homophobia, and then cheating. If you don't know, this is a spin-off novel of The Hate You Give, which is an amazing book by Angie Thomas. I believe this book takes place in like the same neighborhood. So our main character, her name is Bree. She wants to be a rapper. She's doing whatever it takes to be a rapper because her family is actually very poor and she really wants to make money to have her family. What you must know is that her father, Lawless, I believe, yeah, that's his name, Lawless. Basically, he was a famous rapper in the neighborhood. However, he passed away due to gun violence. But yeah, this book is about Bree and how she becomes a rapper. This book is so freaking good. I love this book way more than I thought. I just had so much fun listening to the audiobook. First of all, I highly recommend the audiobook because it's so freaking good. Let's talk about the characters. I honestly adore a lot of the characters in this book. Bree is such a good main character. I will say there are some parts where I'm just like, I don't agree with you regarding this, but then I do have to remind myself she is pretty young. I guess like the part that really makes me like love her is when she just feels so much pressure to be a famous and successful rapper just to get the money to help her mom, to be honest. She only has her mom and her brother, so they're like struggling. They're doing whatever it takes to keep the family going, but still it's really hard, and Bree really needs the money, so that's why she's doing whatever it takes to be a rapper. Her friends are so great as well. My favorite is Sunny. He is a very funny character, so I really adore him. I feel like the romance, here's something that I want to talk about. The romance, it was fun at first, but I really wish Angie Thomas ditched this whole love triangle thing, because yes, there's a love triangle between Bree, her friend Malik, and then this guy named Curtis. We really don't need this love triangle because it kind of has cheating. Malik has a girlfriend, and then eventually Malik and Bree kiss, but he has a girlfriend. I hated that scene. So I really wish we get Bree and Curtis and we just focus on their relationship, because there's potential definitely, but since we're in this love triangle thing, it was just a lot. So I really wish we don't have a love triangle in this book. I will say the part that really stands out to me is Bree's relationship with her mom. If you don't know, her mother, I believe in this book she's been 8 years sober. In the past, she is a victim of drug abuse, and that has affected the entire family so much, because if you think about it, she witnessed her own husband get killed right in front of her, and that messed her up so badly that she turns to drugs to kind of like get rid of the pain. However, her past actions really affect what is going on in the future, because Bree, she views her mom in a different way. She actually calls her mom Jay for a good chunk of this book. Now that I think about it, I really love the mom because she is such a strong character. If you think about it, like yes, she did drugs in the past, but as of the beginning of this book, she is 8 years sober and she's doing whatever it takes to take care of her children, and I have to commend her for her strength. There's just so much going on with this book and I love every minute of it, to be honest. The audiobook, like I said, is so freaking good. So this, such a good book. So I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that is it for my January and February wrap up. I'm so tired. I will never combine 2 wrap ups in one video. I've been sitting here for hours. Yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know what's your favorite book of January or February of 2021, and if you have read any of the books that I have mentioned right now, then of course let me know your thoughts. I have a feeling this video will be so freaking long. I'm so sorry. I promise in the future I will never do this again. But yeah, that's basically it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.